Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is your verbal mentor. Let's look at this RC. All right, a quick analysis of this RC first. So the first paragraph talks about the 4 principal criteria used in choosing a method for determining past climatic conditions. The 4 criteria used in choosing a method. Then paragraph 2 talks about method 1 and its limitations, the problems associated with this method. And paragraph 3 talks about the second method and the problems associated with it, its limitations. So the first method is, by the way, measurement by measuring the water levels in ancient lakes. That's method 1. And pollen profiles is method 2 for determining past climatic conditions. Okay. The questions now. The first question asks you to identify the difference between marine and continental sedimentation. The question source is first paragraph. And in these lines here, the author says, because dating only a small number of layers in marine sequence allows the age of other layers to be estimated fairly reliably by extrapolation and interpolation. By contrast, because sedimentation is much less continuous in continental regions, estimating the age of a continental bed from the known ages of beds above and below it is more risky. So long story short, there are 2 differences therefore between continental and marine sedimentation. Number 1, that continental is much less continuous. The sedimentation is much less continuous in continental regions. And number 2, by estimating the age of a few layers in marine sedimentation, the age of other layers can be determined, but that is difficult to do in continental regions. Let's look at the options now. A says data provided by dating marine sedimentation is more consistent with researchers' findings in other disciplines. Nowhere in these lines has the author talked about any other discipline, any discipline other than climatology, paleoclimatology. It is easier to estimate the age of a layer in a sequence of continental sedimentation. Quite the opposite. It is easier to estimate the age of a layer in a sequence of marine sedimentation is what we just read. Researchers are more often forced to rely on extrapolation when dating a layer of marine sedimentation. They are not forced to rely on it. It is just convenient for them to estimate by extrapolation the age of different layers. So C also goes out. Marine sedimentation is much more continuous than continental sedimentation. We just read it here. So this is answer to our first question, D. Which of the following statements best describes the organization of the passage as a whole? Okay, we already have organization of the passage with us written here. The first paragraph talked about 4 principal criteria in choosing a method for for determining climatic conditions. Paragraph 2 talked about one method. Paragraph 3 talked about the second method. So A says the author describes a method. No, he describes a method in second paragraph, not in the first paragraph. So structure of this passage therefore does not align with A. पहले बात करना चाहिए 4 principal criteria का, उसके बाद method का. B says the author discusses the method of dating marine and continental sequences. Again, he does not discuss any method. C says the author describes the common requirements of methods. Common requirements as in the 4 principal criteria. So seems like the correct answer. For determining past climatic conditions, and then discusses examples of such methods. Yes, method 1, method 2 are the examples of such methods. C should be the correct answer. The author describes various ways of choosing a material, not a material, of choosing a method. So this also goes out. It can be inferred from the passage that paleoclimatologists have concluded which are the following on the basis of their study of snow line elevations in southwestern United States. This is my key phrase here. Snow line elevations in southwestern United States. Let's start reading from here therefore. Now this line says, the fact that lake levels in this region appear to have been higher during the last ice age than they are now was at one time attributed to increased precipitation. Okay, so it was believed earlier that the higher lake levels in the last ice age were because of increased rainfall. Higher lake levels was because of increased rainfall, it was believed. On the basis of snow line elevations, however, it has been concluded that climate was not necessarily wetter, so there was no more rainfall. Now it is believed that rainfall ज़्यादा नहीं होती थी, but rather both summers and winters were cooler, resulting in reduced evaporation. Okay, so the reason now it is believed that the reason was reduced evaporation rather than increased precipitation. If you look at the answer choices, D says just that. The high lake levels during the last ice age may have been a result of less evaporation rather than more precipitation. That is the correct answer. A is contradictory. A says there is usually more precipitation during an ice age because of increased amounts of evaporation. Well, increased evaporation nahi tha, reduced evaporation just we read. There was less precipitation during the last ice age than there is today. Well. That comparison has never been drawn. It is said here that climate was not necessarily wetter, so there was not necessarily more rainfall. That does not mean there was less rainfall. There was not necessarily more rainfall का मतलब हुआ शायद बराबर होती होगी, ज़्यादा नहीं होती होगी, but then B says there was less rainfall, which is incorrect. And ये lower lake levels were lower, तो opposite हो गया. Lake levels in the last ice age were higher is what we read. So C also goes out. Contradictory. Moving on to the next questions. So which of the following would be most likely the topic of a paragraph that logically continues the passage? So let's see what should continue the passage. As we saw, second paragraph talked about method 1 and its problems, its limitations. And paragraph 3 talked about method 2 and its problems. So what should continue? Probably, most likely, a third method for investigating the past climatic conditions. That should be a logical continuation to this passage. All others are irrelevant. Number 5, the author discusses lake levels in the southwestern United States in order to. Okay, so why does he discuss the lake levels in southwestern United States? Well, we just read that this paragraph talks about method 1, which is the lake levels, and the problems associated with method 1. It was earlier believed that more rainfall was responsible, but now it is believed that reduced evaporation was responsible for higher rainfalls, which means this method is faulty, this method is wrong. And therefore, author has discussed the lake levels in southwestern United States in order to do what? In order to provide an example of the uncertainty involved in interpreting the lake levels, essentially to discuss the problems associated with first method, problems with method 1. A was a tempting choice, illustrate the mechanics of the relationship between lake level, evaporation and precipitation, but this is not the broader purpose. If you look at the broader purpose of the passage, he discusses method 1 and the problems, method 2 and the problems. So this was not the broader purpose behind discussing the lake levels in this particular region. Now, number 6. It can be inferred from the passage that an environmental signal found in geological material would not be useful to paleoclimatologists if, okay, environmental signal found in geological material would not be useful. The question source is first paragraph, where he says at least some of the material must have retained the signal unaffected by subsequent changes in the environment. Okay. Now this is the third criteria, which means that it must have retained, which means the essential condition for it to be useful is that the signal must have remained unaffected by subsequent changes in the environment. It is an essential condition for it to be useful. Therefore, the question said it would not be useful. When would it not be useful? When this essential condition is not met, which means the signal has also gotten affected by subsequent changes in the environment, which means D, it also reflects subsequent environmental changes. It would not be useful when it also reflects subsequent environmental changes. So guys, if you like this and you want to do more practice of VARC with me, subscribe to the channel. This is your verbal mentor signing off. Cheers.